בחייה בציין ומספד בירושלים.
This Tisha B'Av is different. This Tisha B'Av follows October 7th. And it not only follows October 7th, but it follows the aftermath of October 7th. As a matter of fact, we're still, right now, living in the middle of the aftermath of October 7th. And so this year, Tisha B'Av needs to incorporate and include references to October 7th and beyond. How will we focus on this year? World Mizrachi, under the inspired leadership of Rav Doron Peretz, has prepared a series of videos recorded by individuals who were themselves personally affected by what happened on October 7th, and recorded these videos dafka in the places in Otef Aza where their loved ones were killed. These videos are powerful, gripping, and extremely important. And we need to watch them, focus on them, and think about them on this Tisha B'Av. I want here to offer a few words of general introduction, tying these very important videos into the ritual of the day of Tisha B'Av. There is a long history of kinot, or liturgical poems, that were written throughout the ages to be recited on Tisha B'Av, commemorating various tragic events that occurred to our people in ancient and medieval times. For example, the Sefer Kinot, the Ashkenazic rite of the Sefer Kinot on Tisha B'Av, includes kinot mourning for the Asara Haruge Malchus, the 10 martyrs who were killed in the 2nd century, the communities of Speyer, Worms, and Mainz, Kihilot Shum, Speyer, Vermeisa, Magenza, who were destroyed by the first Crusaders at the end of the 11th century, the burning of 2 wagon loads full of Sifrei Kodesh in Paris in the middle of the 13th century. Kinot were also written to remember the murder of more than 30 Jews in Blois towards the end of the 12th century, and also written in the wake of the Khmelnytsky massacres that decimated Polish and East European Jewry in the middle of the 17th century. This practice continued during and after the Shoah, when kinot were composed to mourn for the destruction of European Jewry. Already during the Shoah, in the summer of 1944, a kinot was composed entitled Mi Yitain Roshi Mayim. It's patterned after a kinot by that very name that's in the book of Kinot that describes the destruction of Kihilot Shum at the end of the 11th century. After the war in 1945, Yehuda Leib Bialer composed a kinah entitled Eli, Eli, one that achieved almost canonical status in the following years. On Tisha B'Av of 1971, Rav Menachem Mendel Kasher, one of the great Gedolim of that time, told an acquaintance, Rav Yisrael Rosen, that it is impossible for him on Tisha B'Av to mourn for Speyer and Worms in Mainz while paying no attention to the cries of Jews in Auschwitz, Majdanek, and Treblinka. Ani eneni misugal lomar kinot, hein enan midabrot elai la'achar hashoah ha'ayuma be'Europa. Ei efshar lifkot et harugei Magenza, Vermeisa ve'Speyer, v'liznoach v'lishkoach et kol demei achenu hazoakim eleinu me Auschwitz, mi Majdanek, umi Treblinka. They don't speak to me any longer at this point after the Shoah, and so he felt that it was incredibly important to be able to compose kinot that relate directly to the events of the time. Efforts continued, and over the course of time, a number of kinot for the Shoah were composed both in the Dati Le'umi, the religious Zionist community, and in the Haredi community. Since then, kinot continue to be composed in the Dati Le'umi community. The Sephardic chief rabbi of Israel, Rab Meir Ben Zion Chai Uziel, wrote a kinah that commemorated and mourned for the destruction of the old city of Jerusalem in 1948. And there was a kinah that was also penned in the wake of the disengagement from Gaza in 2005. This is the background for what brings us here today. The magazine Mizrachi is printing a new kinah, authored by Rabbi Yosef Tzvi Rimon, commemorating October 7. Very much regretfully in our minds right now as I speak. How do we relate October 7th to Tisha B'Av? We recite this new kinah, focusing specifically on October 7, on Tisha B'Av. But not everybody agreed that composing new kinot for new tragedies was appropriate. And I want to read for a moment from a book that I edited a number of years ago, entitled The Lord is Righteous in All His Ways, featuring the teachings of Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik on Tisha B'Av. And I quote, and this is very relevant to what is unfolding right now before our eyes. Of course, said Rabbi Soloveitchik, there is no doubt that on Tisha B'Av we should recite a special kinah for those who were killed by Hitler. But we do so within the frame of reference of the kinot we already recite on that day. Instead of Vilna, we mention Worms or Mainz. It doesn't really make much of a difference, because the scenes described and the words of despair, mourning, and grief are the same. One has in mind to remember and experience the catastrophe, the disaster that occurred in the 40s of the 20th century within the frame of reference of what is described here as having taken place in the 11th century. We should have the Holocaust in mind when reading other passages where Rebbe Lezer HaKalir described what happened during the Churban. And Rabbi Soloveitchik repeatedly, in all of the years that he taught on Tisha B'Av, would weave in references to the Holocaust, associating events that occurred during the Shoah with events that were described explicitly in the kinot for ancient and medieval tragedies. And this is what brings us also to October 7, not just to recite a new kinah, which I believe we must, but also to focus on the old kinot and give them contemporary meaning. And this is what you will see in the videos that have been prepared for you. Rav Doron points to the word eicha, a rhetorical question of a grieving heart. Eicha, the book of Eicha. Eicha, kinot that begin with Eicha. Eicha, right now, Tisha B'Av 2024, a rhetorical question of a grieving heart. Jen Arieli points to the kinah that begins Eish tu kad bikirbi, that has a consistent refrain, contrasting B'tzeiti mi Mitzrayim, B'tzeiti mi Yerushalayim. The joy, the euphoria of what it was like, finally, the exodus from Egypt, the end of slavery. And on the other hand, the opposite end of the spectrum, the sadness, the mourning, the tragedy after the destruction and leaving Jerusalem. And she points out that whereas in the kinot they are two separate experiences, but now they are experienced simultaneously. The joy and the pain, the sorrow and the excitement at the same time. Reference is made to Arur Yom Mafchidi Pa'amayim. In the original context, 2 Batei Mikdash were destroyed on Tisha B'Av, Pa'amayim. In the context of October 7th, the double loss, the loss in one family of a father and a son. And then the end, Eli Tzion Ve'areha, despite the pain and despite the sorrow, there is hope. There is pain, but may there be the dawning of a new dawn. And so October 7th this year, Tisha B'Av, extremely important. What do? We recite a special kinah. And also as we recite all the other kinot, we resonate with, we draw associations, we connect to the experiences of our people. Just very recently, this past October 7th and beyond. Tisha B'Av is a Yom Avelut, but Tisha B'Av is also a Yom Nechama. It's expressed in many different ways halachically. There are a number of practices that change once we move into the afternoon of the day of Tisha B'Av. We get up from the floor and we sit on a chair. We could prepare food for the evening, and most famously, we recite Nachem, a whole paragraph that begins with comfort at Mincha on the day of Tisha B'Av. May this Tisha B'Av also be not only a Yom Avelut, but may it usher in also a time of Nechama. May we turn the corner, and may we experience directly and powerfully Nechamat Tzion v'Yerushalayim b'mheira b'yameinu. Amen.
Adono b'chiyo b'tzion u'mispeh